Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, Cindy Rasicot, who's here to share with us her new book, This Fresh Existence, The Heart Teachings from Bhikkhuni Dhammananda. What happens when one woman dares to challenge centuries of religious traditions, not with protest, but with compassion, wisdom, and an unwavering heart? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Cindy Rasicot is a retired psychotherapist and author of This Fresh Existence, a Nautilus Gold and Special Honors Ordained to Lead Women's Spiritual Legacy Award. In 2025, she traveled to Thailand with her family, where she met Bhikkhuni Dhammananda, an encounter that changed her life forever. In 2020, she wrote the award-winning memoir, Finding Vulnerable Mother, A Daughter's Spiritual Quest to Thailand. So welcome to the show, Cindy Rasicot.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. And of course, congratulations on your Nautilus Book Award. I mean, what a big deal that is.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Can you share with us a little bit what inspired you to write This Fresh Existence?
Yes, well, it's an interesting time for me because it's a little bit of backup. I met Venerable Dhammananda in 2005 when my family and I moved to Bangkok, Thailand for 3 years for my husband's work assignment, my then husband, former husband. And in the meeting with her, it was very synchronistic. I did not go looking for a spiritual teacher, but you know the saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears? That's kind of what happened to me. I just went to a conference in Bangkok. She was speaking there and she said some words that I will never forget. They're kind of etched in my brain and spoke to me personally. She said, "We cannot solve anything with anger. Anger doesn't lead us anywhere. It is much harder to practice loving kindness and compassion. That is the goal of Buddhism." So that was kind of the lightning bolt that struck me and drew me to her in the beginning. I spent a lot of time. She has an all-female monastery called Sangdhamma Kalyani in about 56 miles west of Bangkok. And her mother established that in 1960. Back to the question of how I wrote the book, I just was very intrigued by her because she is the very first woman to be fully ordained, meaning she is the equivalent of a female monk in her country. So in the entire 700-year plus history of Thailand, there had never been a female, what's called bhikkhuni, or female monk. And she was the very first one in 2001 to receive ordination. And I thought, this is an amazing story, partly because who does that? Who stands up against the patriarchy? Who stands up against the injustice and goes in the face of that and becomes the first ordained woman? It's about the spiritual freedom of women and their right to become enlightened, as the Buddha did enlighten women in his time, in his day. So I just wanted to tell her story. And the funny thing about this, the evolution of this book, I wanted to tell her story way back in 2008. I started writing a version of the book. And oddly enough, it turned into my own personal memoir, which was really not her story. It was more about me. It was called Finding Venerable Mother, A Daughter's Spiritual Quest to Thailand. And it's kind of like the first step. It's how I meet her, what she taught me, my time in Thailand. And then I thought for the second book, This Fresh Existence, this is her story. And her story has to do, the first part of the book is the history of female ordination in her country and somewhat internationally in Asia. The second part, which is the part that the people say they like the best, is her teachings on compassion, forgiveness, uncertainty, aging, etc. And people say they go back to that time and time again because it helps them just cope with certain issues in their lives. And the third part is called Light of Our Beings, which she kind of reflects on her experience being ordained for 20 years, how things have changed. And I do add my own stories. I have received something called temporary ordination twice. I have taken 10 precepts, Buddhist precepts, shaved my head, worn the robes for 2 weeks. It's not a permanent situation. I am not what is considered an ordained nun. You take the vows in a temporary 2 week time period just to see what is monastic life like. So anyway, all of the above is included in that very long answer to your question. And curiously enough, I'm just now writing her memoir, which is her life story in her words. And it's a new book project that I'm just launching. So you see, it's taken me 20 years to do what I originally intended to do, which is write her story in her words. But it's been an evolution.
How did you see your relationship with the Venerable Dhammananda evolve over time, and what impact did it have on you personally?
Yes, I think in the beginning, like any teacher-student relationship, I was kind of in awe of her, very much venerating her. It is not uncommon to bow at the feet of your teacher in Asian countries. I tend to really revere that tradition. Some Westerners look askance at it. To me, it's not about subservience, it's about respect and, as I said, reverence. But in the beginning, there's a funny story about my memoir, Finding Venerable Mother, the first book. I wrote it. This was 2020. I went right when the pandemic broke out, as a matter of fact. Anyway, I was visiting the temple, and I really wanted her to like it. You write a book. It's about your teacher. You would kind of adore her. And I would say why I adored her, because she's taught me everything I need to understand about practicing compassion, forgiveness, and loving kindness in my life. Back to the initial story, why did her talking about anger interest me? Because I'd struggled with it all my life. Struggled with a childhood wound, the rage that revolves around that, and the evolution of that for whatever reason, the universe drew us together. So she was my teacher, no question. She's still my teacher. But what happened in 2020, I presented her the book and she said, it's okay. But she said, too much I, me, my, mine, which in Buddhist terms is too much about your own ego. My Venerable Dhammananda, my teacher, because in essence, one of the key teachings of Buddhism is you must let go of attachment. And of course, I had nothing but attachment to her. And the beautiful thing about our relationship is that she could tell me this. I was kind of mortified, to be honest. I just sort of went, wow. But, I've done a lot of personal psychotherapy in my life. And the truth is, I'd rather hear the honest truth about me as another person sees me than pretend it's not there. So that was kind of, I guess it was a moment of, in psychology, you call it transference. I transferred onto her to be my mother, essentially, because I don't want to go into it here, but she was essentially the loving mother who provided the unconditional acceptance that I always craved and wanted. And of course, when I got to the point where, as a good Buddhist teacher, she would say, yeah, but this is about Cindy's spiritual path, your spiritual growth, your path to enlightenment. Yes, I'm important. A teacher is important. You kind of have to lighten the grip a little. In the course of the last 5 years, I would say we've become maybe more equal. I certainly, she's a Buddhist scholar. I mean, she studied the original teachings of the Pali texts that the Buddha wrote in 500 BCE. So, I'm no scholar, obviously. But on a personal one-to-one relationship, we're friends. Wait, I'm not tongue-tied when I sit with her anymore, nor is she. But I doubt that she ever was. But I guess that gives you kind of a picture of evolving from student teacher, where there's a bit of a hierarchy involved, to more of an egalitarian relationship.
How do you see her reshaping the landscape of Buddhism in Thailand?
That is a great question. Without going into too much detail, the history of the evolution of Buddhism, came from India, which was a caste system in which women were obviously seen as subservient to men. There's a lot of negative connotations that were put on women inherited from the Indian tradition, and Thai women. And that is because they were seen as unclean. They still hold the belief that women cannot be enlightened, that somehow it's for the man to walk the path of enlightenment as the Buddha intended it. So how she's changed the landscape of Buddhism in Thailand is she has brought what I called a Buddhist feminist perspective in. Now, what does that mean? It means that historically she didn't know anything about feminism. She went to Harvard in a conference called Women, Buddhism, and Social Change in 1983. And there she saw militant feminists for the first time. She saw, heard the tragic stories of women who had suffered. She, I guess you might say, she became conscious at that point of the possibility of herself becoming an activist. So at that time, she was a Buddhist scholar. She transitioned to becoming a personal activist. In other words, it became personally important to her. She was the person with all the knowledge about Bhikkhuni, or how women become ordained monks in Thailand. And what good was she if she wasn't doing anything about it? It was certainly she calls it the great turning point of her life. Now, why is that important? Because today she is working to establish the validity of the fact that the Buddha ordained women in his lifetime. He ordained his mother, his aunt, excuse me. His mother actually died, Mahapajapati, and she led 500 women. And there's a story behind that, which I won't go into. The Buddha first would not allow them to be ordained. They went back 3 times, and on the third time, his assistant Ananda said, "Are you saying that women don't have the same spiritual capacity, that they can't be enlightened like men?" And the Buddha said, "Yes, they can. They can be enlightened." So this is a whole new concept for the Thai system. And the fact that women can be enlightened, have spiritual integrity, have the right to follow their spiritual pursuits. These are all new landscape, new ideas for the to come to fruition in Thailand. And I understand. I mean, I'm going to go in September. She's going to. When she was ordained, in 2001, there were 300,000 male monks, and she was the first woman. Now there are 285 women throughout. I don't have the number in my head. Maybe 37 provinces in Thailand ordained. So physically and literally, she has brought a women's Sangha, a women's Buddhist community in the Theravada tradition. She established that in her country. I mean, that's phenomenal. There is a woman named Wayporn who is in Chiang Mai. She's also a Buddhist feminist. And she works with probably women trying to reshape their lives. Perhaps they've been prostitutes, perhaps they're poor women, trying to understand their value as human beings, trying to undo the violation of the harmful concepts towards themselves as women that they thought that was true, just like the way the patriarchy spells it out. So she's considered she is an international scholar, so she has changed the landscape not only in Thailand but in Asia in terms of introducing. There's a female community of ordained women in Indonesia, in Cambodia. She's just a key figure. And I want to say one other thing, that her academic studies laid the groundwork for the revitalization and the expansion of the ordination of women, because she really went back to the original text and proved that the Buddha, in fact, did ordain women in his lifetime. And that's kind of a key signature of her research. Without that, she herself would not have gone forward had she not been convinced herself of the truth about his ordaining women. She wanted to understand that that was a historical fact.
How powerful is that? I can understand why they call her the rebel monk.
Yeah, she doesn't like that because it's the press labeled her that, the media labeled her the rebel monk, and I actually tried to label, the title of the book was, I don't know, I probably had rebel monk something, 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 and she said, "No, because she espouses nonviolence. When people come to her with anger, criticism, and judgment, she doesn't look at it as, she doesn't react in anger." Joan Halifax, who is the Zen Roshi, she has a center in Upaya in Santa Fe. She was a good friend of hers, colleague, and she said, Venerable Dhammananda has a strong back and a soft front. And it is the strength of her determination and her commitment to stand against the patriarchy, which is so incredible. And she also embodies a compassionate viewpoint. So, for example, there was a reporter that was following her around and criticizing her, calling her the bald-headed woman. I don't know. He at the time she was ordained, he was just giving her a heck of a time. And finally, I guess, she's trying to avoid him, and this went on for a couple of years, and finally he was at the temple, and she looked at him and she said, I'm just an old woman who wants to, I can't even remember the words, something to the effect of practice my religion. What's the big deal? And what she said was, he stopped bothering her because she said, I do not view him as, I don't know what she say, bad or wrong. He's ignorant. It's ignorance. And of course, ignorance is one of the foundations of the Buddha. Ignorance, not seeing the reality, the truth of the situation. And, I've asked her through the years, does she see herself as courageous? And she said, not particularly. She said, I have complete faith and trust in the Buddha. And that's what drove her to make the change, was her spiritual beliefs, her spiritual commitment, her love for the Buddha and Buddhism, and her spiritual practice, meditation. She's very advanced. When you sit with her, it's like, people talk about living in the present moment. I never experienced it till I sat with her. She is fully present, fully attuned to your person. At times, I felt transmission from her to me, and in those moments, I can honestly say it's an I thou moment. We're connected in the present moment. There's no separation between she and I. We are one. That is the essence of her practice, is we are all interconnected. She's a social activist. She took the Bodhisattva vows, which means she wanted to work on behalf of the suffering of other people. So back to the rebel monk, is she didn't feel it was a good label for her.
Well, I can understand why the way that you've explained that and how that unfolds. And it has me thinking, I mean, her lesson on anger was such a pivotal point for you. Are there
Mhm.
other lessons that really stand out that you can share with us?
Yeah, she has really taught me a lot about forgiveness, and the second chapter of the book really goes into that. And I'm just going to read one short paragraph because I realize people don't want me to go on forever. But opening our hearts to love others unconditionally is what leads us on the path of forgiveness. A mother's love is a good example of unconditional love. A mother can forgive her children no matter what they have done. Other people may judge her children for their mistakes, but a mother's love remains constant. The real question is, can you really love your enemies the way you love your children? That is the true meaning of loving kindness. I mean, she just says these things that, like, kind of challenge you to your core. I don't know anybody who's really angry and upset. Their pulse races, I don't know, I don't think it's good for you physically. It's kind of like, I'm sure many people have said this in many ways, but you're kind of shooting yourself on the foot. You're suffering. You're suffering yourself when you're very angry. So in the teaching, it's really be beneficial to yourself first, forgive yourself first, and then you can be beneficial to others.
Such an important piece. And it's so difficult for people to get to a place where they, number one, can love everybody like they love their own children. And then number two, get to a place where they can even find a little sliver of forgiveness for themselves. For
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
those that have a difficult time with either of those, how would they start?
Venerable's honest advice is go back to your breath. Because with our incoming breath, we nourish ourselves. With our outgoing breath, we take care of others. It's almost like a healing meditation. And she says we neglect ourselves right in the beginning with our own bodies. We need to respect ourselves. We need to take a deep breath and let that really settle. And sometimes it helps to imagine, for me personally, bringing in a golden healing light. You might say it's a bit of a change of heart towards oneself. It begins with honoring that we are worthy, that we are worth the time, the nourishment, the self-care, especially as women, because I know myself, I was brought up to take care of others first. And it's been a big lesson for me to understand it's okay to take care of myself. Because when I'm stronger, when I'm feeling better, I have more to give to others. So it's some simple things like breathing in a kind and nourishing way towards yourself. It's kind of practicing loving kindness just through a simple breath exercise.
I really love how in your book you quote her as saying, loving unconditionally means caring for others, even the people we do not like. And
Right,
and I
right.
know for folks who are on the spiritual path or a path of enlightenment or just want to be better people, that can be a very difficult thing for them to do.
Yes, and honestly, we're human. We're not. There isn't, for me, there's no concept of perfection. Perhaps the ultimate forgiveness lies in accepting the beauty of our flaws. And by that I mean, maybe I can't love my enemy. Maybe it's just too much to bear. And you know what? Even the fact that I'm trying to entertain that possibility is a bit of a gift and a bit of growth. This is all on a continuum. I don't think there's any end result, but certainly for me, the journey of my life has been a spiritual journey. And there's no beginning and no end to that path as far as I see it. Well, maybe there was sort of a beginning when I met Venerable Dhammananda, but I could go back even into my childhood and describe spiritual experiences. So I guess I take that back. There is no beginning and there is no end. It's a continuum. We are human. We are flawed. I don't mean that in the sense of bad or wrong. I just mean we have weaknesses. We're not perfect, and we never will. I know for myself, I never will be. I have one person in my life I can't forgive, and I'm like, I'm okay with that. I don't stew about it anymore. I don't fret about it, but it's like, not ready. And that's okay with me.
And what an honest and just powerful way of approaching life in the way that she also teaches.
Hmm.
What do you think that her work will teach Western readers, especially women, on their spiritual path?
Oh boy, your questions are great. Thank you. She has, I think I read about this in the book. She's a role model for women who want to seek change and transformation in their life. And the interesting thing for me is that, I was part of the West, I'm 74 actually. I was part of the white Western feminist movement in early 70s. There is a lot of, in this country, there's a lot of, certainly right now, a lot of polarization, a lot of anger, a lot of um, discord. And I think the lesson she has to teach us is probably don't proceed through anger or discord. It's much harder to perhaps try to have a conversation, to listen to the person who differs from us. Okay, I'll simplify it. She's taught me a lot about compassion and healing. I don't necessarily hear people talking about compassion and healing right now. And by the way, that's a message for men as well as women. The honest truth is, to men, some of the rifts that are happening, anger and hatred, of course, are not really helpful in that scenario. So it's a more compassionate attitude, perhaps, than I had as an angry feminist in the early 70s. And Asian women, and other cultures too, not just Asia, I think they come from less of an individual I, me, my, mine perspective and more of a community, we, us, our, if I may, or certainly that's Venerable Dhammananda's position.
Well, it seems that the lessons and teachings within this book are universal. So I can see where it's not really applying to men and women, although her story in many ways is very profound.
Yes, yes.
If readers take away a message from this fresh existence, what would you want that to be?
Probably go back to my first book. We have the capacity to heal. We have the capacity to change. And I sometimes think people don't know that. Perhaps they're in the beginning of a journey. And I guess hope is the message that I derive from reading this book, that change is possible, healing is possible, and we all must work on behalf of ourselves and others to improve our situations, to help one another. Maybe that's the message.
I think that's a great message. So thank you, Cindy. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more, not about just this book, but all of your books?
Yeah, I have a website, www.cindyrasicot, all one word, my name.com. I do teach, and I know everybody listening to this is all over the country, but I'll offer a workshop at something called the Mercy Center in Burlingame in late October. And for anyone who's interested, I'm actually leading a trip to Thailand next October 2026, and we'll actually go by the temple and spend a few days with Venerable Dhammananda. I'll connect with anyone who wants to have a dialogue, to be honest. You can contact me on the website and start up a conversation. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I've connected people with Venerable Dhammananda who really want to talk to her. I mean, there's a multitude of possibilities.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Great, and I really appreciate your questions, really good questions. So thank you also.
Well, thank you, Cindy. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your award-winning book, This Fresh Existence. Make sure to visit Cindy's website at cindyrasicot.com for more information on her work and to be part of her community. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.